Italy's prime minister warns the coronavirus crisis could lead to the collapse of the European Union. Giuseppe Conte weighed in on the pandemic in a rare interview with our partners at BBC News. He's pushing for a coordinated response from the EU that would allow countries to share the economic debt. This comes as confirmed coronavirus cases and deaths finally begin to fall in Italy.
So with more on this, we are joined by Chris Livesay. He is live in Rome for us now. So, Chris, certainly as some countries can kind of see the light at the end of this pandemic, many are turning to how do we emerge from this without economic destruction. The Prime Minister of Italy is floating a very interesting idea of, sharing the economic burden with other European Union countries. But I'm wondering how that's being received.
Well, Anne-Marie, it's actually been broadly shared by most countries in the European Union who realize that they need to share the burden, share the debt that not only Italy, but other countries like Spain that have been particularly hard hit by the coronavirus are going to go through, that are already going through. I mean, I'm speaking to you from a country that's been under lockdown for well over a month right now. They basically turned the economy off. And the next big crisis the country is facing is how to weather this storm financially. And it sends a message to every other country in the European Union. Will you be there for me in my hour of need? And it kind of goes all the way back to the global economic crisis when Greece was flailing and its economy was tanking and everyone was wondering, would the European Union bail it out? Ever since then, there's been a lack of unity in the European Union that's only been heightened since Brexit took place and since the UK took moves to separate from the European Union. So many governments in the European Union right now are questioning the validity of the European Union, if it still has the strength to stand up for every member of that union.
And Chris, you recently traveled to the hard-hit northern region of Italy. We saw images earlier in the pandemic from our correspondents like Seth Doan and Charlie D'Agata, and many instances looked like a ghost town. Take us through the scene right now and tell me, do people feel like the government has done enough in its response to contain the coronavirus?
Well, Vlad, northern Italy is really the epicenter of the outbreak in Italy, which you'll know has the highest death rate anywhere in the world right now. So we went to the hardest hit area in the hardest hit country in the world. And the reality is they cannot bury the bodies fast enough. People are dying so quickly that the military has had to intervene. We went to a warehouse that until recently used to house roadwork equipment. They've had to take out those road signs, bulldozers, in order to make room for all of the bodies that are piling up inside. And this is just a regular warehouse. It's not refrigerated. It's not a morgue, and the spring months are coming up. So the military is having to deal with what to do with human remains. I mean, it's extremely sad to witness, but this is the reality on the ground. Churches have also become makeshift morgues. However, they do say that it's getting better. The rate of death and the rate of contagion seem to be slowing. If you want to know how people feel about the government's response, all you have to do is look at the latest polling. It shows that the government of Giuseppe Conte has more than 70% approval. I think that's because this country has adopted what can only be considered a warlike posture. People here know that the country is going through a life or death crisis right now, and they want to support their government in order to get through that. However, it remains to be seen if the government will still have that support as this economic crisis endures. Vlad?
So, Chris, back to that interview with the BBC that Prime Minister Conte did. Russia is one of a number of countries donating important supplies to Italy. And the Prime Minister was asked whether or not those supplies came with conditions. His response was the mere insinuation offends him deeply. Now, we know that at times Russia has been accused, more than just at times, has been accused of not being transparent. There have been some questions as to whether or not they're accurately reporting the pandemic within Russia, within the country of Russia. I'm wondering why it's so significant the way the Prime Minister responded to that question.
Well, the Prime Minister responded the way he did because he himself has been accused of being subject to Russian meddling. He's close to a party that is considered to be a populist party, and several populist parties in this country have long-standing ties with Russia and have been accused of even taking money from Russia for their own political interests in the past. So the Prime Minister's tone was seen as being defensive of that. And it's important to remember that Russia has a long-standing record of being a beneficiary of any time the European Union suffers from a crisis of confidence and starts to lose that U in the EU, the union of the European Union, especially as the European Union grows and moves into Eastern European countries that are traditionally part of Russia's sphere of influence. Anne-Marie?
Sorry, Anne-Marie, I just wanted to ask Chris about new reports that the coronavirus outbreak in New York may not have originated in Asia, but perhaps Europe. What are you hearing about that, Chris?
Well, indeed, that's what the latest reports are saying. They can't identify exactly which person or which flights the coronavirus crossed the Atlantic on. One thing we do know, however, is that Italy was the first country to experience this explosion of the virus, to lock down the country, and of course still suffers from the greatest death rate. However, it's also important to point out that Italy was very aggressive in taking measures to limit the spread of the virus. They've been testing by the tens of thousands every day and continue to do so. And now they're crediting that response for that downward curve, or for the flattening curve, as we see the death rate and the contagion rate start to improve in the country. Vlad, Anne-Marie?
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. I just want to let you know that, we ran one of your stories yesterday where you were in northern Italy and you were going, from house to house where people knew that they could have been exposed, but they simply couldn't even get tested, couldn't leave the house to get tested. We know that you're kind of putting yourself at risk as well, and we really appreciate it, Chris. Thank you so much.
Thank you.